A very good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, October 27th, 2014. It's my honor to call a regular meeting of the City of Burnsville Planning Commission to order. Welcome, Commissioners. Mr. Slania.
Thank you.
Members of the listening and viewing audience, we appreciate your tuning us in and following our Planning Commission meeting. The agenda for tonight's meeting is as follows. Item 1, adoption of the agenda. Item 2, approval of minutes from the September 22, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. Item 3, public hearing an application for Polly Ames for a conditional use permit to allow installation of a standing seam steel roof on the existing home located at 13320 Nicollet Lane. Item 4, work plan item, LED light band regulations discussion. And item 5, updates, then adjournment. Commissioners, first item, adoption of the agenda. Any changes to any addition, changes? Do I hear a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Bradrick.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Corey. All in favor?
Aye.
Passed on 5-0 vote. Item 2, approval of the minutes from the September 22, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. Hope each one of you had a chance to read the minutes over. I did. Any changes, corrections?
No.
Minutes were well written, so a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Thomas, seconded by Commissioner Benke. All in favor? Aye. Passing a 5-0 vote. Item 3, public hearing, an application from Polly Ames for a conditional use permit to allow installation of a standing seam steel roof on the existing home located at 13320 Nicollet Lane. Mr. Slania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, this is a public hearing for a conditional use permit. As indicated in the background, conditional use permit is required for standing seam metal roof. The Planning Commission and Council reviewed these requirements just about a year ago. It was fall of 2013. We looked at different designs, different requirements, and so forth. The existing house will remain as is. We're not changing a footprint or anything like that, but the applicant is pursuing a new roof. Because of the shallow pitch of the home, there's been ice dams and water problems. The applicant views the standing seam roof as a durable, long-term investment, more effective at preventing ice dams, better drainage off the roof, avoiding getting on the roof for shoveling and raking snow off. As you'll see on the visual aid, the subject site and the surrounding properties are all zoned R1, single-family residential. They are also designated as single-family in the comprehensive plan. The property was platted in '54. The home was constructed in '57. The site is relatively large lot, about 0.4 acres in size. As I mentioned, the ordinance requirements changed as of September of 2013, requiring the conditional use permit. I do have a image of, on the left is the existing home. I wanted to bring this because it really does show the shallowness and the pitch of the roof. Certainly we can understand the ice dam problems that would happen with this. On the right is the proposed material. It is a charcoal gray color. Surveying the neighborhood and driving around, the immediately adjacent homes also have a darker colored roof line. The immediate home to the south has a very similar design, also a 312 or similar pitch roof, and they have a somewhat of a gray or some tone of gray roof. As you'll see in the picture, there is significant tree cover in this neighborhood. It's an established neighborhood. So aesthetically, the homes are buffered from each other. There's not a home that would be immediately looking down upon this or significantly impacted with the design. The garage is detached from the home. Difficult to see in this picture, but it is a detached structure. The applicant will be doing the home and the garage at the same time, same material. You'll see the ProSnap. I believe it's a Midwest manufactured product. This does satisfy our requirements for concealing the fasteners, and a quality product. It's not painted or anything in the field. It comes to the site, well, pre-cut, prefabricated, ready for installation, which is exactly what we're looking for. The ordinance criteria does look at the health, safety, welfare of surrounding properties with a conditional use permit. This is outlined on the top of page, I believe it is page 2 of your report. Excuse me, page 5 of the report. The roof is harmonious with the residential character of the neighborhood. It is applicable to the city's zoning and comprehensive plan standards. We've talked about sustainability a lot, using the durable long-term materials. That's what this is. It's designed similar to, or will be designed similar to, other roofs in the neighborhood. Is not out of place with other homes in the neighborhood. Staff sees no concerns with the proposal. Again, we're supportive of the color, the fact that there is mature trees in the area helps distinguish and prevent, if there were aesthetic concerns, it would not impact the whole neighborhood. The adjacent property to the south is very similar in design. The adjacent property to the north is I believe it's a 2-story. There is some spacing between the homes. To the north and to the south, there's some spacing between the homes. Anything out the back is significantly different because of the topography that exists in the neighborhood. Our building official has reviewed the materials. Staff has no concerns at this time. Mr. Chair, it is a public hearing. The property owner, Polly Ames, is here. Should you have any questions for her, and I will take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Slania. Commissioners, you've heard Mr. Slania and the details on this application. Any questions for him? I see.
Chair,
Go
I
ahead,
think
Mr.
with
Commissioner Bradrick.
With the 312 pitch roof, this is the best product to put on there. They're going to struggle with asphalt shingles with that pitch.
Quite honestly, I remember when this house had a stone built-up roof, and I was surprised when they were able to put the shingles on it. It had a stone roof.
Really?
It was built up with rock on top of it. I had friends when I was in school that lived there. The standing seam is, I mean, I couldn't even see a metal shake roof in this case because of the low pitch. So
This roof has been there for 20 years. It's going to be the death of me if I don't steel on it. 'Cause I'm up there, I'm 64, I'm up there shoveling in the winter.
sure, no, we don't want that
Commissioner
anymore.
Belkey is a little older than 20.
Did your installer discuss snow guards with you at all?
Would you like her to come up?
Well, sure, if she would.
You know, why don't you
Just-
come
just-
up and
just for a minute,
come up to
yeah.
the podium? Just give us your name and your address, please, for the records, and then you can take some questions.
I'm Polly Ames. The address is 13320 Nicollet Lane.
Welcome, Polly.
Thank you.
Ms. Ames, I was just curious if your installer had discussed snow guards with you.
I don't know what snow guards are, so.
I haven't at this time.
Okay.
The only kind that I will install is one that gets riveted to the tops of the standing seams.
Right.
It's a special custom bent piece that you put on over the top of the standing seams.
Right.
They do sell another kind that just screws down and kind of like an L.
Right.
I've seen problems with those. So.
Basically, I'm bringing it up because you have ice dams now because of the heat from the home going through the roof. That isn't going to change, and the snow will sit on the roof. And basically, instead of it sliding off, the snow guards help keep it in place until it melts in a more gentle fashion. So,
Okay.
just something to think about.
Any other questions for either Ms. Ames or Mr. Slania? Thank you.
Thank you.
I think this, I'm glad that we did work on metal roof about a year ago and sent it to the city council, so appreciate. I think this is Mr. Slania, the garage is also, the roof of the garage will be included, right?
Correct. It would be re-roofed, same material as the home.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners, this application requires a public hearing. I now open the public hearing, and anyone in the audience who would like to come up and provide any input on this application, please do so. Okay, seeing none, we close the public hearing. Commissioners, over to you. Any discussions?
Chair, I would be willing to make a motion.
Please go ahead, Commissioner Bradrick.
I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council approval of the conditional use permit for a standing seam seal roof on the existing home located at 13320 Nicollet Lane as presented with no conditions.
Motion moved by Commissioner Bradrick.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Thomas. Any other discussions on it? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Passed on a 5-0 vote, and this will go to the City Council.
Next week, Monday, which is the 3rd.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Very much. Commissioners, we move on to item 4 in the agenda. Work plan, LED light ban regulations discussion. Commissioner, Mr. Slania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, this is an item that was established on the Commission's work plan from, I believe it was either December of 13 or January of 14. Specifically, these are the bands. LED is becoming more common. They have been neon in the past, other types of fixtures. You see them around convenience stores, gas stations. The lit bands around the gas canopies in the building, it draws attention to the site. It does provide some illumination. To be honest, the most common example I have is Holiday Station stores went through somewhat of a rebranding or redesign of their stores a few years ago. That's when this was originally brought up to staff. And then it was added to the work plan subsequently from that. From staff standpoint, we've done some research, and we'll get into that, and wanted to share with you what we found and how other communities look at this. To start off, some discussion points to keep in mind from the commissioners. Is this still a concern? It was initially when Holiday started with their redesigns. Maybe it's not so much anymore. If it is a concern, what specifically should we be talking about? Is it the brightness? Is it how much can go on the buildings? The locations? These are some things I'd like you to keep in mind as we go through this. As with all of our research, we try to reach out to our surrounding communities based on demographic, size, location within the metro, all those sites. So we did look at Egan, St. Louis Park, Apple Valley, Brooklyn Park, Plymouth, Minnetonka, Coon Rapids, Eden Prairie. What staff noticed is we are already on the more conservative end of the spectrum. We do consider it to be signage, we do calculate it as signage, and we apply those calculations against what a business or a property can have for signage on their total site. There are other communities, for whatever reason, don't view it as signage, may not permit it or regulate it. You can see a number of them do look at it from glare standards, from a glare or spill standard, especially if it's adjacent to residential. They'll take a closer look at that. Brooklyn Park was the only community we discussed this with that did not permit them at all. And the other item I wanted to bring up was Plymouth. They allow them as long as it fits within their sign or signage allotment, but only on facades of the building that face a street. That would be different than our ordinance. As long as the square footage is there and they can put it up on all four sides of a building. So those are a few unique items that we found in our research. Again, we do consider them to be architectural features, illuminated architectural features. We do count them towards the signage. We do issue permits for these. Right now, the only regulation we have on them for spill or glare is a foot candle calculation. And what that is part of the design, we ask for a photometric study to take, this is most commonly used for exterior light poles in a parking lot. What foot candle percentage of what measure of light do those lights provide at the property line? This is of concern when you've got a commercial site adjacent to any type of residential. You don't want that light spill or that glare falling into somebody's house, into somebody's bedroom window. All of those factors come into play. We do look at those calculations on these LED bands. The unfortunate part or unique part with this is the way these bands are set up, similar to digital reader boards, they may not project much light spill at a property line or a distance 50 feet away, but they are extremely bright when you look at them. The source of the image can be very bright and still not trigger any glare or spill limitations. We discovered this when we looked at our billboard criteria when we allowed the digital display billboards. Through a similar study like this, we found other communities use, they have the spill requirements or the foot candle requirements. They also have a different calculation for the surface or the screen of that image, how bright that can be. And obviously during the day, they allowed a brighter image because of the ambient light. At night, when the sun comes down, it gets dark. That light travels farther, may seem brighter. That criteria, or the night calculation, comes down significantly. And in the review of our ordinance, that's somewhat of a easy fix, I'll say, that we can apply to this. We have it on our changeable message boards, the pylon and the monument signs that you see now. We have the same criteria in our billboard requirements, but we don't have that requirement for a sign that is mounted to the wall of a building, or these light bands that may go around a gas canopy. So that is something staff discovered that may be of interest for the Planning Commission. And finally, when we're looking at these work plan items, these ordinance amendments, there are options. If this is after spending some time with these LED bands and seeing them around the metro, are they still a concern? Do we need to look at an ordinance change at all? If it is a concern, how do we want to regulate these? How and how much are located on the building? Or lastly, the brightness and these ambient light sensors that will reduce the amount of brightness at night and give the businesses a higher level of brightness during the day. Commissioners, this is not a public hearing. This is simply a discussion for this evening. Staff is looking for some direction, and we can move forward however the Planning Commission would like. We can certainly prep some language and come back for a public hearing in the future if the Planning Commission would like to see that. I think that is all the slides.
Thank you, Mrs. Slinger. Commissioners, your thoughts? Commissioner Tahiri?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, my only concern is location of these signs facing directly residential windows at night. I think we have to concentrate on that issue, if that by itself creates issues or not. For myself, if I have my bedroom window facing this ambient light at night goes all night, or the timing of it maybe is also important. 8 o'clock to be shut off, or 10 o'clock, or 6. Maybe it would bother me, maybe not. It's up to neighbors and residential. I guess that's my only concern.
Like, don't we get into a little issue then with how close? Is too close? I mean, if it's like, let's say the Super America at 5 and Parkway, there's an apartment complex across the street. Is that too close, or do we base it on the foot candles?
Well, I've been involved in past, not just for the signage, but just the lighting of, let's say, gas stations that located in about 50, 100 feet, even 200 feet. There were residents that in a public hearing. There were quite a bit of concern and rejection. So I just want to make sure we don't fall into that trap when it comes for every project in a public hearing. This issue come up and we have to go back and forth how to deal with it, rather than structure in place in ordinance to prevent any possibility.
Chris, can we, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can we,
Yeah, discussion.
when we did the new Honda dealership, there was a fair amount of concern from the neighbors to the south with the lighting, and there was timing and which direction the lights and some candles, and can the same thing be addressed? Does it, I mean, at one end, I guess, would be that we require a CUP if it's next to an R1. If it's not next to an R1, then it could go through.
How about any R?
Yeah, any. I mean, I think there's something that could be
Residential area.
Yeah.
could be handled that way, if it's completely surrounded by a
Business.
commercial property. Do we have, I can't come up with an example of this, but the best example I've got is the new 35W bridge. All of the examples that we spoke about today is one color of a light band. But like the changing signs, what if the next person wants it to go from bright yellow to bright red to bright green to bright blue? And how quickly can those colors change? Is there anything that we need to address, or I guess that would be a concern of mine? Because as I see the standard Holiday Station store, that I think that's fine. But I guess from a thinking about it going forward, my thoughts are, is the next step where these things are going to start flashing, and then would we follow the same path that we did with the changeable signs, that it could only change in a certain interval?
Right.
Yep.
Okay. I do know that I don't know if this counts, but I don't think it should count if they've used LED lighting and help me see with the term, but down lighting or architectural lighting, where they've got soffits or eaves where they've done LED lighting that are not visible as you're driving up. They're just a down light on the building from a decorative standpoint. And so if they're doing that and it's not visible from the street or straight on, I don't think that should be part of counting against the signage.
Well, any building lighting currently, I mean, wall packs are not allowed unless they are
Mounted at the
lands
90
and downlight
degree.
and that
Yeah.
kind of, I mean, and for the canopies, the same thing. The canopies have to be shielded currently. To me, these are architectural features, illuminate architectural features. I mean, they define the edges of the building, they define the edges of the sign. You know, moving it into that category to make sense to me, it certainly makes it a little bit easier for us to look at them differently. If we move it into there, does it take it away from the ability to permit them as a sign as well?
Commissioners, if I can just jump in, because we've had some good discussion. First off, I wanted to mention that the holiday stores we have down there that have these light bands, they do comply with the ordinance. We've reviewed them. We've looked at the photometrics, the calculations, all that stuff. We've issued permits. So it's not like they're unregulated, but even though they meet the ordinance, there's commissioners or council members, whoever may not appreciate them as they're designed. So we do have a regulation on them, and both sites satisfy the ordinance. The second item would be timing. We've only had discussions with a scenario where any type of architectural feature would change color over time. Nobody's pushed the issue. We've never got into a true battle over it, but we have tried to apply the ordinance to say it needs to stick with the reader board requirements, so that it is static for 30 seconds and then it could change. Certainly as technology goes on, you can imagine there would be some kind of feature that changes over time. The AIM Center has lighting in it that changes over time. Certainly not every 30 seconds, but that could happen at some point. So that is something we could certainly look at. It's not a concern right now because I think staff has a handle on it using other parts of the ordinance, but it is a good point. The other thing I wanted to bring up, the architectural illuminations, that would apply to these bands. Typically, if it's a decorative sconce or something like that where you're not seeing the bulb, you're not seeing the point of illumination, it's just casting light at some point on the building, we haven't got into that much detail.
And I just wanted to make sure that, because I agree that shouldn't count against the signage if you can't see the bulb.
Right.
I just wanted to clarify that.
But on the flip side of that, we don't see it very often, but storefronts had previously looked at illuminating their awnings, their fabric awnings at night, to give it that glow, and then of course it glows the color of the awning fabric. That was, or should that come up, those are calculated under similar fashion, so we apply to that. We apply that to our signage requirements. So I think I would need some time to find it. I know it's in the ordinance. There are certain commercial districts that require signs to be shut off. I believe it's 11 o'clock or when the business closes if they are adjacent to residential, any type of residential.
I think I agree with that, because the point that Commissioner Tahiri brought up about the proximity to residential properties, we have to take that into consideration, and I think that's already taken into consideration.
But that is if you're immediately adjacent. That being across the street is a different story.
Well, and I think that's probably the issue that the council has here. When you come down 35, you crest the hill at 98th Street and you see the holiday sign at Parkway, right then. That's a good 5 miles away, 4 miles away. That's a long way.
I think we have to, go ahead, I'm sorry, excuse me. Chris, I think we have to do a more in-depth study of the proximity, the distance, glare, changing the lights at night, really, for businesses, the timing of when the signage shut down. I mean, obviously, every business have the right to have a signage for their business to increase the marketability and profit. I mean, that's understanding. At the same time, if I have a 90 years old or 80 years old grandma living with me, living in that bedroom, and the sign at 11 o'clock is still going on and blinking, that would definitely bother the person. Now, that may happen or may not. For ease of future complication for the city, for review, I think we need to look at all the negative, all the possibilities that we may encounter that cause issues and deal with it before we put in place all the regulations.
I agree. One little point, though, too, I think, the issue, I think, with Holiday is the actual frequency of the blue color. Because there's several other I mean, after I read this yesterday, I looked around, and there's several other buildings that have blue neon, blue lighting that isn't nearly as eye-catching as the Holiday color. Now, the Holiday color actually is pretty much the same blue that the police cars use now. And I think they hit on something. This color grabs your eye. More power to them.
I agree with you. In taking all of this into consideration, we should try not to be too restrictive. The businesses work hard to be recognized and to do business, and as our city has been very business friendly throughout the years, and we know that we need to take certain things into consideration, the proximity to residential property. If a business going to have these lights and it's in the middle of a business district, I don't worry about it too much. However, what's going to happen, we're going to have these same lights, people will start to change colors, and we need to be prepared for that. The blinking lights, the changing of the colors, how much time, how quickly they can change, the rate of changing. Those are the things I think we needed to look into and come up with the guidelines we will have. It's not to restrict them, but at least to put some limits. So that's what I'm looking for. And if staff can come up with that and bring it back to the next seats on the agenda for the November 12th meeting, I think we should be able to move on. Commissioner Corey, sorry.
I guess my thought is, I guess first a question: has anybody ever complained about the holiday lights?
We had complaints initially that that first winter they came up, or whatever time of year. I think specifically if it's raining or something like that, and that blue catches some raindrops or wetness on your windshield, I would say they've dropped significantly or non-existent now.
Has any residents or anything? I don't know if anybody's close enough down.
No, this was really, it's been a few years, but I think it stemmed from more of a traffic or a driver's aspect than residential.
I guess my thought is sort of what Chair Singh said along with Commissioner Bradrick, I think is, to me, just my only concern really is the residential area. If, if it's close enough to a residential area, and I guess Commissioner Thierry talks about it too, that, if it's in somebody's window or something, I mean, obviously that would be an issue. And otherwise, it sounds like there are standards that are being used already as far as how much square feet and all this, the signage and that sort of thing. So to me, to sort of minimize the amount of regulations but still provide some guidance would be, is this going to interfere with a residential area type issue, and look at it that way, and then probably from a glare type of measurement or something along those lines.
Commissioner Thomas?
I agree with pretty much everything that's been said too, but I want to touch on something that Chris brought up, and that's, the source of the light might be a bit problematic. So, my thought behind that is, can we regulate the lumens that are emitted from that light? And the ambient light sensor, which distinguishes daytime and nighttime use, might be an appropriate way to regulate that. I'd like to hear more about that if you had some time to research it.
Certainly. Commissioners, that is information we have readily available, again, from the billboard study. We went through a similar situation when the new city sign went up. They never worked right, the first day you install them. So there were a couple of weeks of where it was tweaked and those measurements were checked and see how bright it was. And that is information we have readily available. And I can certainly provide information on what our restrictions are being adjacent to residential or across the street from residential and some of that information.
That would be very helpful for us. Commissioner Benke?
I guess I wanted to sort of look at our current regulations real quick. I think that having the light calculated as signage and that it counts against total signage for the site, I think that by itself is a self-regulating device, very, very effective. Allowed on all sides, that probably should be something looked at with residential, I guess. I think the biggest problem we're going to find with the glare is that the LEDs distribute light differently, terribly differently. And it's entirely possible to have a point that goes straight out even though we're seeing the glow. And, I think the struggle is going to be how do we measure LEDs specifically.
That's a great point. Commissioners, there is, and we've actually got it in our language. It's been a while since I explained it to anybody, but it's measured in nits, and that is specifically that surface brightness of the sign. To Commissioner Benke's point that even though you're seeing this blue band on the bridge coming south from Bloomington, we've had it checked and it's still not exceeding the spill. So there we're getting into the different calculations and regulations on the LED. Similarly, I'm sure you could argue that the reader board, these digital reader boards, can be seen from a much larger distance or greater distance, but they are required to be dimmed at night, and there are certain regulations. We could certainly go through all this, and maybe that holiday store is still visible from the bridge, but it may be at a lesser tone.
Well, and keep in mind too that when you are up close to the holiday sign, I mean, we're not trying to pick on them.
No.
The red appears as bright as the blue when you're next to it, but not when you're 3-4 miles away. So I really think that the color of the light has a function here that is going to make it even harder for us to sort of put any rules to it. Because if somebody picked a red, you could have a brighter red than the blue. It's different. The frequency of light is different that you see.
Yep,
This is a good.
I think you have. I think you got some directions that commissioners are giving you to look into research and come back. Oh, Commissioner Tahiri, sorry, Commissioner.
Just a couple other questions, points I have, Chris. Are there restriction on the size and dimensions of these billboard, these signages? To me, if the sign facing a residential 24 by 24 inch versus 5 by 5 foot, it's a huge impact and difference.
Sure.
So perhaps I understand the goal is to eliminate regulations and rules, but we still have to anticipate some of these issues and put it in place in order to avoid future, again, complaints and complications. So perhaps for R1 district, we need to look at some of these regulations that we can put in place and control that. The signage, the size of these, and where they're facing, perhaps, and also the timing. Perhaps in residential area, the shut-off timing would be 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when there's still daylight, versus 11 or 10, so the glare doesn't bother. So perhaps we can think of some of these exceptions for our district's signage. Also, my other question is, I see on the report here you've done quite a bit of research on other cities that they have this kind of signage in place. Have you researched the type of perhaps complaints and concerns public and community neighbors had expressed over the years for these? Have you thought about them and what they are and how we can implement them to our?
A good question, Commissioners. Actually, we had not gone down the complaint or the concern standpoint simply because this is relatively new. I believe Holiday has always had some kind of light ban or gas stations in general. I think it was the switch over to the LED, and as the Commission stated, the frequency of that specific blue was probably no accident. They did their research and they came up with that. Just in some of the information we got from the communities was by email. Some of it was phone conversations. I can't say anybody really came out and said it was an overwhelming concern. We seem to be the only ones recently that are looking at these criteria.
Chris, given that they're the only one that doesn't allow it, did Brooklyn Park offer any reasoning?
They didn't. And frankly, I ran out of time to follow up with them, but it'd be interesting to hear what they had to say.
Sure.
City of Brooklyn Park is very restricted. I have dealt with them in a number of issues and projects, and whenever we go in front of them, we are well prepared.
Oh, Commissioner Bradford.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine.
Chris, to kind of tie it together when you talked about for a work session and what you're looking for, I with Commissioner Corey would be supportive of not, making this more difficult. If we can figure out a way to make sure we protect the residential areas with some existing thing, I think that's good. I agree with Commissioner Benke that I believe it should be part of the building signage. I think that's a self-monitoring for the however long it is around the building. I'm a little concerned about if we can manage, if they start flashing, can we use the existing ordinance for that? And I guess the only thing I question on the signs from the brightness, and I could be wrong, and I kind of drove around and tried to pay attention to this. The new Holiday Station store at Nicollet and 13 is, in my opinion, it's not obtrusive at all. The sign, the banding around the sign is well concealed within a perimeter of the sign. So as you're staring at it from the side, you can't see it at all. The existing sign at the Holiday Station store at the Parkway and 35 might still be neon. It's really bright. It's not concealed at all.
Right.
And then I guess to make my final point, if you go look at the remodeled Holiday at
Irving and
Irving and 42. The banding around the building is not bright at all.
Right.
They reused the sign that was there, and it's as bright as the one at the Parkway and 35. And I don't know what the differences are in it, but that's my own, when you are driving in that bright sign, and if it's not going to flash colors, then I guess it's not as big a deal. But I could be very supportive if we could fall somewhere in those guidelines without adding a lot to it. I just don't know the difference between those three signs. Because when you're driving down 13, the one at Nicollet and 13 is not near as bright as the other two are.
I think the other two both face the road well, and because of that, they really wouldn't, by virtue of their orientation, affect something, you know, a residential next to it, for example. You know, they basically are attracting street traffic.
Yeah, the one on Parkway
Right.
is
Is
looking
aimed
at
at the
freeway.
freeway. It needs to, you know, and while I seem to complain about it, I think it's actually very smart, too.
Yeah, on the part of the
Right.
business is very smart.
You know, the one on Nicollet on 13, I think because of where it sits, your angles on it are all different. You know, you're not seeing it from the same way, and I think that might be part of it. You know, we talked a little bit about off times, and I'm wondering if dimming for these might simply be a better solution. That there's a way to bring the lumens down, bring the visibility down when it's not needed quite so much. And you know, that might be a little bit easier pill to swallow for these companies as opposed to simply, well, you got to turn it off.
Yeah. Commissioner Corey, you had
I think that's a very good idea, is the not turning off, but the sort of dimming, I think, is along those lines. And sort of along with my other theme, I was just thinking about this, that I remember similar conversations along these lines with the electronic billboards
Yep.
and
The reader boards.
the reader boards and everything else, and you know, I think with sort of some very narrowly tailored regulations, they seem to coexist now very nicely with everybody, and nobody really even thinks any second thoughts. I mean, I noticed that coming home today from work is I pass electronic billboard, and it's just sort of there now. It's not, you know, it's not distracting and
Well,
anything like that.
the one on 35 coming into town?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I see
think
that
they
too.
look really good.
At first, when I came on board, at first, to me, it was kind of distracting, you know. But after you get accustomed to it, okay. Any other suggestions for Chris? I think you have enough to work on, and you'll bring it back for the next meeting, right?
Yes, commissioners, I appreciate this. Is very good feedback. We have a lot of this information available. I just got to get it in a format to you. We'll plan to talk about it at the next meeting. We won't plan any type of public hearing. I'll just bring you some red line information, and we can decide what's too restrictive, what's not restrictive enough, and go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, the next item on the agenda is updates. Any updates from commissioners? Chris, anything that you?
Just our next meeting. I think that falls 2 weeks from tonight.
November 12th.
Correct. Sorry, not 2 weeks from tonight. The 12th is a Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday, November 12th. Okay.
Mr. Chair? Chris,
Yes.
is there any update on the granite and furniture store?
That Deb had worked on,
Yes.
the public hearing. I can tell you, they've got an contractor. They've got somebody who's got, I believe they have building permits in, being reviewed by our building official. So, what I know, they're on the right track.
Very good.
Okay.
That's it.
Anything else? For the good of the order? Okay, the next item is adjournment.
I move we adjourn the meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Bradrick, for that motion. Commissioner Corey seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone, for a good meeting. Appreciate those who have tuned us in. thank you so much. We work very hard to make Burnsville the best place to live, to have your business, to work, and to shop. We all live here. Thank you. Good night.
Right.